Okay, so I'm handing over to Ross McDonnell, who's going to present to us on the Fitzgerald Biosphere in Western Australia. Thank you. Thank you, Ross.
Uh, yeah, thanks. Thanks for that introduction, Ian. I've got a PowerPoint presentation which I'll share with the screen.
That's there.
It's there.
Yep,
Okay,
fantastic.
very good.
Actually, I might just get everyone to go on to mute except for Ross.
Okay, so that's can be seen. Is that okay? All right. So that yeah, I'm giving a talk tonight about the Fitzgerald Biosphere Reserve, which is in, as Ian said, in southern Western Australia. So I wanted to start by acknowledging, well, recognising this presentation relates to the traditional lands of the Noongar people in southern Western Australia. So just a bit of an overview. I should start by saying there's 40 slides, so we'll sort of run through them pretty quickly. But so it's sort of a bit of a travelogue. It's a little bit about land use management in uh, Western Australia. It's a bit about the different types of planning mechanisms that exist, a little bit about the threats to the natural values in that area, a bit of a focus on the what's called the Ravensthorpe Wildflower Show. So Ravensthorpe is a small town in southern Western Australia, and then look at some of the floristic examples that exist in that area. So I should start also by saying I'm not a botanist. This is not a deep dive into the botanical values in that part of the world. It's more about how are those values managed, what sort of mechanisms are in place to uh, ensure that there's conservation effort occurring in that part of the world. So yeah, my wife and I have got a sort of a hybrid off-road caravan and a four-wheel drive. And so we were away for 10 weeks. So it was 2 weeks to get across to southern Western Australia. We were there for 6 weeks and then it was 2 weeks coming back. So we went up through Central Australia to get there, which involved going up through Burke, through to Birdsville and up to Boulia, which is in Western Queensland, and then on to what's called the longest shortcut, which is a series of roads that run between southern Western Australia and central Queensland, and a fair bit of it's gravel. So once we got to Boulia, which is in Western Queensland, we turned left and started heading westerly along the Plenty Highway that brings you out at Alice Springs, through to Uluru, and then down the Great Western Road, it's called, and you pop out at Kalgoorlie. So it was about 2,800 kilometres of gravel just to get to Kalgoorlie. And as you can see, we came back along the bight. So I've got a drone, and this is an image showing the Great Central Road. One, I should just go back. One of the reasons I had that slide was that and that map of Australia is it shows you where the deserts are in Central Australia. And so I think we went through about 6 or 7 different deserts, and they are quite different. They represent themselves differently. Um, anyway, this is a picture of the Great Western one, which is towards the western end. One of the things you see along as you're going along that road are camels. So this is me bothering a mob of camels with my drone, and so there's about 1 million camels in Australia. So Google said today, and interestingly or alarmingly, they can double their population in 9 years. We have the largest wild population of camels in the world, passing through between Alice and Uluru, we went to Kings Canyon, and I caught up with a ranger that works there, and she said that they had recently had a helicopter shoot and shot 5,000 camels in and around Kings Canyon. So there's quite a concern about camel populations in it across central arid Australia. Yep, wrong way, sorry. When you get to Kalgoorlie, one of the things you do is you go to look at the super pit, which is on the outskirts of town. I think it's probably about a 5 minute drive from the centre of Kalgoorlie. There's a huge mine. It's an example of where a photograph doesn't really give you the scale of something. Um, down in the bottom, you might be able to see my cursor, but down in the bottom of the pit, there's some black dots. Now, those black dots are trucks that carry the ore out of the pit, and they are about the size of a double-story house. So they're huge trucks, and they wind their way up through and out. But it's quite a sight. That prompts me to talk about travelling into Western Australia, and um, it manifests itself in the south. Was that mining is a big operation in Western Australia? Obviously, we sort of all know that. So there's about 1,000 mines in Western Australia. There's 148 gold mines. They produce about 70% of Australia's gold production. So when we're traveling, we've got a sat nav in the car, which is set with Google Earth, Google Maps, and with a satellite view, you can see you can driving along, you can see where all the mines are. And so this is a bit of a side, but we went through a couple of tyres to get to Kalgoorlie, and just outside of Kalgoorlie, went to a tyre repair place. I rang beforehand, and the guy said, "I might be here. Come along, turn up, see if I'm here." The reason he said that is he got the contract to repair the tyres on 20 gold mines that are within 100 kilometres of where he is, and uh, he said some of the mines have got a budget of $1 million a year just to replace their rubber tyres. Anyway, that's an aside, but you go through towns in Western Australia that once were agricultural, and now agriculture's become a sideline, and support services to the mining industry is what's really happening now. All right, it's all right. So the next slide. So this is a Google Maps slide. So we came down from the top right corner of the map. Just Kalgoorlie is just outside the map frame, and down through Norseman and down to the coast. What you see when you're travelling along is a transition between uncleared vegetation, chenopod shrubland, mallee, eucalypts, and then as you go further south and southwest, you come into taller trees, forest, and then all of a sudden you pop out into the cropping land. And what this map shows you is the extent of the clearing that's occurred in past decades to support the agricultural industry in this southwest corner of Western Australia. So all that browny tan area in the middle is all cropping land, agricultural land, cropping and grazing. And so what's left of the natural vegetation is ringed around the outside, around the coastline. And so the area of interest for this talk is the Fitzgerald River National Park and a Biosphere reserve which surrounds it. So I'll move on to that. So there's different ways of cutting and dicing the landscape in terms of being able to understand what the values are in a particular area and how those values are being protected. So one of the ways, and I'm sure a lot of you will know, Australia is split up into what are called bioregions, which are defined by areas which have a climate and a geology and a vegetation which is different to the bioregion beside it or anywhere else in Australia. So there are 89 bioregions in Australia, and one of the uses of them is that you can compare one bioregion with another one, and you can apply what are called CAR principles to a bioregion. So that's you could consider a bioregion and consider how much of it is protected in national parks, for example. And so, if you apply the CAR principles, which is comprehensive, adequate, and representative, you can compare one to another. And so, across Australia, we've got 62 of the bioregions have got more than 10% of the area with under protection with national parks and the like, and there are 27 that are less than 10%. An example here in New South Wales is that most of the bioregions in the far west of the state are well below 10%, whereas most of the ones along the coast are above 10%. In this area that we're in the southwest, there's a combination of both. The bioregions that hug the coastline, which you can see, are well over 10%, whereas the ones that are inland a bit are well below 10% because of the amount of land that's been converted to cropping, which was shown on the previous slide. Another way to look at an area is to consider its as a floristic region. So again, Australia is split up into various floristic regions, and there is one called the Southwest, and this is a map that shows it. If you were to look at the blue numbering, you can see the rainfall that occurs. So down in Albany, it's 1,200 millimetres a year, and you move into 600 range, and then further northeast, you drop into the 300 range. So the amount of rainfall in that portion of Australia has allowed for the diversity of vegetation and biodiversity that exists in that part. So in that floristic region, it's recognised as one of the global biodiversity hotspots. There's 35 of them, and then this is across the globe, and that's the Southwest Australia one is one of them. It has a high plant diversity, a broad range of threatening processes. Studies show that there are 8,379 vascular plant species. By way of contrast, there's 1,500 in the UK. 47% of them in that floristic region are endemic. There are several local hotspots, and the Fitzgerald Biosphere Reserve, which I'll talk about shortly, is one of them. And with those bioregions that I mentioned earlier, there are 8 of them that fall within this floristic region, some over 10% protected, some under 10%. For this floristic region, they have worked out where the threatened plant populations are, and you can see the red dots. Don't worry about the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not sure what that was. I pinched this slide from another publication, but it shows that there are threatened populations right through the whole southwest, and again that sort of brings into play, well, what sort of management arrangements exist to try and manage the values and protect the values in the area, given the number of threats and the amount of clearing. That's another good slide to show the amount of clearing that's occurred in the southwest. You can see it with the light colour. So the threats in the region are many and extensive, and some of them apply to here in New South Wales. So there's dieback, there's Phytophthora. If you go to any of the national parks in that part of the world, you can't help but to see the signs that give warnings around Phytophthora. Most of the reserves at entry points, if you're walking, there are devices there to clean your boots to try and get Phytophthora off. Land clearing, obviously, is while a lot of it occurred decades ago, there is still land clearing pressure. Invasive species. There's aquifer disturbance, rising salinity, rising water tables, inappropriate fire regimes affecting seed germination of native plants. Phosphorus use as a fertiliser. Sorry, on those cropping lands in particular, superphosphate has been applied. and there's runoff, and that runoff can go into the remaining native vegetation areas. Glyphosate use on crops, glyphosate being an example, being Roundup, that you might know the name, and climate change. So when you heading into that part of the world and you're passing through, as you must, through all the cropping land, you'll see paddocks and paddocks. If you're in the right time of the year, which we were, canola was just, out in full bloom, you know, um, paddock after paddock. And one of the reasons I'm showing this one and the next one, which is, the broad nature of cropping in that part of the world, is that Roundup gets used quite extensively in canola production. So if a farmer's using Monsanto Roundup Ready seed, it comes with Roundup as part of the process of applying seed and managing the crop during its growing season. And in this case, in southwest New South Wales, they apply Roundup to kill the canola at the end of its growing season. The reason they do that is because there's so much canola grown that they have to have a mechanism to manage the harvesting and the storage of the grain. And so they have a schedule where landholders incrementally apply Roundup to kill the canola so that they can harvest it in a structured, orderly fashion. So depending on your point of view, that's either a good or a bad thing. Um, we went over to Western Australia to meet up with a group of people, and many of them were sort of conservation minded, and there was quite a bit of alarm when we found out that Roundup was being used so much. They used to do it for barley and for wheat as well, but then the Western Australian government banned Roundup to be used to kill off a crop at the end of its season, whereas they have not done that for canola as yet. All right, so look, I'll just move on to the Biosphere Reserve, and I'll show you a map of the one that I'm interested in a little while, but I'll start by talking about biosphere reserves internationally. So as you can see with that slide, at the moment, there's 759 biosphere sites in 136 countries. In total, they cover 7.6 million hectares, which is about the size of Australia. It relates to a program that UNESCO introduced in 1971 called Man and the Biosphere Program. And there's a quote there, the next dot point, which relates to what the program is about. And basically it's that instead of creating pristine, isolated national parks as a way of ensuring protection of values into the future, the Biosphere program involves the development and promotion of sustainable ways of managing resources in harmony with nature. So people live within biosphere reserves. So typically there's a core area, which might be a national park, and then you have a buffer zone around that, and then you have a transition zone, which is where the people live. And the aim is to try and prevent detrimental impacts on the core area by the people that live in the transition area. So globally, there are 300 million people that live within biosphere reserves. So it's no small international matter. So in Australia, we currently have 5 biosphere reserves. There's the Fitzgerald one in Western Australia, which was created in 78. There's 3 in Queensland around the Sunshine Coast. One of those ones, I forget which one, was just recently anointed as a biosphere reserve. One in Victoria, but there were 10 more in Australia which have been withdrawn. And the reason I'm interested in biosphere reserves is because my role in Western New South Wales involved managing the reserve that was part of a biosphere reserve, being Yathong, which is on that top line along from Wilson's Promontory. So in about 2015 or so, there was a review of the biosphere reserves in Australia, and it was initiated by UNESCO because there was a suspicion, a concern that Some of them had fallen into disrepair, so to speak, because it involves a multi-pronged, multi-agency, multi-tenure management structure to keep biosphere reserves ongoing. And so I know in relation to the Yathong one, the body that had been set up to try and help facilitate management of the biosphere reserve just dissipated. There was lack of interest from landholders. Landholders changed. And while national parks, we continue to manage the Yathong Nombini Round Hill complex, which formed the core area, there was very little interest from the surrounding landholders. Similarly with Kosciuszko National Park in New South Wales, similar thing happened there. So when it came to reviewing the two in New South Wales, the recommendation was that they be withdrawn, which was accepted by UNESCO in 2018. So there might have been 14 or so at the time, and then it dropped to 4, and then there's been a new one created just recently. So here's a map showing the Fitzgerald Biosphere Reserve. So it includes as the core the Fitzgerald River National Park. There is a marine reserve that runs along the coast as well. And then you can see by the legend on the side, there is some buffer areas. So sorry, this is a tenure map. So the yellow shows vacant Crown land. There's a couple of towns in it, and you can see the reserves. Here's another map that shows the different zones. So the green being the buffer, sorry, being the core area, which is the Fitzgerald River National Park. Then you've got a buffer zone around it, which is predominantly native vegetated land, but a fair bit of it is private land. And then you've got areas surrounding it, which are within the sort of same catchment. There's a number of different shire councils involved, a number of towns. This is where the 2,800 people live: Bremer Bay, Hopetown, Ravensthorpe. And there's a management structure in place, which I'll get onto. So the biosphere region, it's about 1.5 million hectares. The terrestrial part's 1.3 million hectares. There's a marine reserve running along the coast, 157,000 hectares. The Fitzgerald National Park makes up 21% of it. There's 2,500 vascular plants in that area. And so for UNESCO to recognise an area, there has to be beforehand effort placed into identifying the ecological and the socio-economic characteristics of a region. And there has to be a plan for how the bioregion would be managed, or how it would be coordinated. And as I mentioned, there's 2,800 people that live in the biosphere region. So there's a group. There's a Fitzgerald Biosphere Group, which has been established and been running now since 1971. It has a board. All of the board members are grain growers. The board has staff. They've got a budget. The staff. They have subcommittees that deal with land management issues. There are a whole range of member organisations, including the National Park Department, a land care sort of organisation. The Ravensthorpe Wildflower Group is part of it. So any group which sort of either manages land or provides support services to the land within the biosphere is encouraged to become part of the biosphere group. So they have a community collective approach. They're trying to get all the players that have anything to do with natural values or socio-economic values to all be part and parcel of trying to progress the biosphere. So it's a non-profit community organisation. As I said, it works with farmers, researchers, there's industry groups and government agencies. They've got a budget that they put into projects. You can look up the Biosphere Group online, and you can see the sort of projects they get involved with, cropping trials. They do things like looking at the design of dams to improve the efficiency of them. They fund fox control across tenure. They have a strategic plan and they produce reports and newsletters. So it's so from a personal perspective, having an understanding around biosphere reserves and going over to Western Australia, I didn't realise one was there until I got there. And so that sparked an interest into why it exists, how it exists, is it effective, what constitutes it. And so that led to the interest, which is how this presentation came about. In addition to that, as part of the resources that are available to the people involved in the area, there is a Fitzgerald Biosphere Recovery Plan that was produced by the Australian and Western Australian governments. So, and that plan is built around the fact that there are 41 threatened species and communities in that part of the world that are listed by the state government and 33 listed by the Commonwealth. So the plan, even though it's a little dated now, it's still in play, and it identifies the threats and the recovery actions that should be undertaken. So I'll move on to some of the things you can do in the area before looking at some of the individual species that are there. But so the Ravensthorpe Wildflower Show runs for a number of weeks at the end of September, and I was really quite taken by it in the scale of it. It's easy to turn up and just to walk into a hall and walk up and down the aisles and look at the specimens and then walk out. And I noticed that's what a lot of people did. But if you consider it from a point of view of how do you get all those specimens? How do you categorize them? How do you present them? There's quite a deal of effort that goes in behind the scenes. So I talked to one of the organisers and got and I was able they took me in behind the scenes and I could see what was occurring and the number of people involved. There's, as I said, the Wildflower Show itself runs each year. There's a purpose-built facility. They attracted funding to build a herbarium and that operates all year round. There are 20 or so volunteers involved. They're all naturalists. Majority of them are well-regarded well-regarded botanists. They have strong links with the Kings Park Botanic Gardens in Perth. They're sending specimens off to the gardens for identification regularly. The Botanic Gardens in Perth send staff down a couple of times a year. And just by way of, an example of the type of effort that goes into putting the show on, the fellow that I was talking to, he's the local John Deere representative. So his interest is in selling agricultural equipment to farmers, but he's a naturalist. And he's been interested and been involved with the Wildflower Show and the whole mechanism for well over a decade. And so he and his wife's role is before the show starts, they have an understanding of what wildflowers they want to exhibit, which is the widest variety they possibly can. And they know where the best examples of each individual species is. And they've split up the biosphere reserve into parcels, and the volunteers are allocated an area of land to go and collect flowers from or specimens. And this fellow that I was talking with, prior to September or in early September, he and his wife travelled 500 kilometres along a 35-kilometre road verge. So they were backwards and forwards over a number of weeks, monitoring the plants, individual plant specimens that they wanted to collect, and then they collected them at the right time to bring them into the show so they could be at their best for the 2 weeks while the show was on. So it's a pretty major exercise that they undertake, and well worth a visit if you are able to. So look, I'll move on to some of the floristic examples that you get in the area. So this is Fitzgerald River National Park. It's along the coast. It's very, very heathy, as you can see. And that's Royal Hakea is the plant that's displayed in the centre. Some swamp daisies, which I understand for some of you that might be more botanically knowledgeable than I, it's not a single flower. This is a series of flowers within that one display, or there's two displays. So there's a Kingia australis, which is on the right. So that's a photo. These are photos that I've taken, all of them. So the Kingia, when I first saw it, I thought, oh, there's grass trees, but they're not. They're a totally different genus, and they have those interesting pods that stick out from the side. And sundews, there's lots of Drosera around. While we were there with a group of people that are there in the video, the picture, we organised to go on a day trip, an orchid trip with the guy on the very right. So he took us out. As it turned out, we drove in the course of a day about 500 kilometres around to various road reserves and national parks. He knew where, in particular, where orchids were in flower at the time. So that photo's at Stirling Ranges National Park, the Stirling Range in the background there. And he took us to this particular site because there was 3 or 4 orchids were out basically where we're standing. But anyway, so some of the orchids that we saw, I'm not an orchid expert, but these are some of the examples. The one on the very left, so I can't remember its name, but it's really tiny. It'd fit onto an old 1 cent piece for those of us that can remember what they were like. It's really tiny, really tiny. A couple of different spider orchids, a green on the left and a king spider on the right. Oops. A few more orchids. So, I mean, like having worked in national parks and having a science degree and been an ecologist, I can understand. I can pick out genera and I pick out species, pick out families, but sometimes the species I find difficult. So going over there, I could see the families and the genus, but you're just quite surprised at how the species could present in quite different forms. So the one on the right is a Banksia in the Stirling Ranges, but it is, in this case, Stirling Ranges, but it's quite widespread. And the Hakea with the flower growing, right in where the leaf grows is spectacular. A Banksia on the right and Eucalyptus on the left. When it comes to pollination, I think we all recognise that birds and insects do a lot of it, but there's a honey possum that this is not my photo. Honey possum exists in that area that helps pollinating, and so with the flowers that it pollinates, there's a need for those flowers to be, or a variety of flowers to be available to the possum year round. So it's quite a fragile situation. Everyone was in the hunt to take a photo like that one, but none of us were able to take one. We never found one, which is common. It's in a broader sense. A couple of photos I took of red-tailed blacks and an osprey that had caught a fish as a prey. Um, a pelican in flight. In Perth, we went across to Rottnest Island and saw a quokka Also a number of quokkas there, so that's one of the ones that was there. So some of the visitor sites you can go to in the area. So Stirling Ranges, the one on the left, there's a what's called Castle Rock, and they've built this incredible viewing platform, multi-million-dollar viewing platform. But you have to scale rocks to get up to the platform, which is a bit odd. But once you're up there, it's a spectacular site looking, in that case, looking to the south and southwest. Or you can go into the Kari Forest, which are a bit further around the coast, and there's a forest walk with a platform that is, I don't know, a few hundred meters in length. You go around in a square shape, up in the tree, up in the canopy. It's quite a spectacular engineering feat, or both of them are. So that's a picture of our caravan. So this is in the national park, Fitzgerald River National Park. So we were camped at that beach there for about a week, and for most of the time there was no one there. It was just us. In fact, there were more whales than there were people. So the door on the caravan is on the opposite side. You can't see it, but we could stand at the door of the caravan and look out just over the top of the heath and see the whales motoring up and down the coastline. And as you can see, the weather was near perfect. So with the drone, I was able to take some shots of southern right whales, most of which had calves in the nearby water. They were only, 50, 100 meters off the shore. And then we came back along the Nullarbor, and I ventured to take the drone out over the water to take that shot. So
Lovely.
anyway, look, um, that's that's the end of the presentation. So back to you, Ian.
Thank you, Ross. Well, I'll just hand it over to the rest of the people if they have some questions at this point. Gary's waving his fingers, so perhaps Gary's
Yeah,
got.
I've got the question in the chat box, but
Oh,
basically, Ross, it's I've been involved, as many people have, with past catchment management committees, which, if they're done well, integrate a lot of sort of things that seem to be happening in biosphere reserve management. Can you tell us essentially what is the big difference between a well-managed biosphere reserve and an ideally managed catchment management committee?
well, ideally nothing. Ideally, they both get the same outcome. So, I mean, a catchment management committee, and I was involved with some in the west and central west of New South Wales as well. I mean, they're defined areas around a catchment, a water catchment typically, whereas a biosphere reserve isn't so much around a water catchment per se. It's basically you've got a core area of a protected area like a national park, and then you have a buffer and a transition zone
Yeah,
around that.
sure.
So they all rely on people. I mean, the catchment management committees relied on the members uh, being involved. Same with a biosphere reserve.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I was really pleased, to be honest, to see that a biosphere reserve was the one that we went to, Fitzgerald, was viable and was active. Because, as I said, the ones that I was involved with in New South Wales had become inactive, and so I had thought the sort of the whole movement around biosphere reserves had seen its day, so to speak, and things had moved on. But it was good to see that one in Western Australia was active, seemed to be progressive, and looking at their agenda, the projects that they're funding, and the nature of the partner organisations, it looks like it's quite viable in moving forward. Yeah.
Yep.
Ross, I'd just like to say thanks for a consummate and wonderful presentation. You've really nailed a lot of the scientific principles that we'd all like to see in a presentation, and that was absolutely wonderful. The photos the flower shots and the shots of the animals and things are all brilliant. Yeah, nothing wrong. Perfectly set up. So thanks for a very good visual presentation. And a few questions that I could probably raise is that first photo that you had showing the road in the desert. Was that a gravel road there? It looked like it was rather sandy at that point, but from the elevation, it was pretty hard to see.
Yeah, it's gravel. So there's as I said, there was about 2,800 kilometers of gravel through that on that route between Boulia and
Mm.
Kalgoorlie.
Extraordinary.
So
You had enough tyres to, to get through, did you? Or
yeah, so we had two flat tires. One of them was shredded. Uh,
you got spare tyres in the caravan, have
yeah,
you?
yeah, it's taken a while to get the caravan and the car to have matching tires. So we've got a number of spares that'll do both the caravan and the car.
Mm.
Um, it's yeah. So we've travelled in our caravan, believe it or not. I keep a spreadsheet. I'm a bit of a spreadsheet
Yeah,
nerd.
yeah, why not? They're
Um,
great.
so we've travelled 77,000 kilometres with the caravan over about a 6 year period. And you get used to gravel roads and you get used to adjusting the tyres, both on the car and the van, to get the best outcome for the tyres and for the suspension. And one of the positive things that you can pick up on is whether or not you're following the graders or not. Because these roads get graded each year,
Oh,
often after a bit of rainfall. And if you can time it, and obviously you don't find out about it until you're there, but if you can time it to go along after it's been graded, the roads are near perfect. It's
so it's
nearly,
much smoother. Is that what you're
oh
saying?
yeah, yeah. Some of them, we came down the Tanami Desert track last year, which goes from Halls Creek and comes out north of Alice Springs. And it was, we could have cruise control on, travel at 80 kilometers an hour. It was just,
Whereas otherwise you'd be doing 40 or something, would you?
yeah, yeah. If you go before the grading, if they've had bad climatic like rainfall and a lot of trucks and yeah, you could be doing 40, or after the grader you can be doing 80. It's yeah.
Now, on that big mine that you showed, such as the Super Pit and the other mines that are there, are those trucks, as they call them, the huge vehicles that take the spoil, phenomenal in size, do they have solid rubber tyres?
Look, I don't know,
Yeah,
to be
yeah.
honest.
I was just
Yeah,
wondering, yeah. And
yeah.
what's amazing is the angle of repose. You see all those steps going down,
Mm.
and it's probably wide enough for those trucks to drive along, but gee, it'd be catastrophe if you took a wrong step with that, wouldn't it? You
I
know?
mean, that part of the world, the trucks that are on the road, I mean, there's train lines that zigzag the countryside. Taking ore to ports,
Mm,
but there's also a lot of trucks, and the trucks that can be quite long. They're not just B doubles; they're B triples or
mm,
quad
mm.
quad trucks. And if you one of them overtakes you, it can take quite a while to do that. So it's
And
and could be a bit
those
scary.
trucks, those trucks, of course, have right of way in their own mine area, and you just keep out of the way because they're just so
Yeah,
monstrous. I was
yeah.
going to ask you also you mentioned predators back in the national parks there, and I saw you mentioned foxes, and we saw the camels as well. But okay, what sort of herbivore, what feral herbivores and what sort of feral predators do we have over, say, in that region?
Oh well,
Maybe in Western Australia first of all, and then maybe more generally. Yeah, go. Mm,
I mean, there's foxes and cats,
mm,
are ever present, just as they are here along the east coast of New South Wales.
mm, mm.
It's good to see that there is a community-driven fox control program which is funded and is sort of tenure blind,
Yeah.
so people are able to get involved in that. Um, in terms of herbivores, I'm not sure. Like I didn't get a sense that deer was present, but
Good.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were. They seem to be spreading out across Australia.
Mm,
Uh, and camels, I assume their grazing and their hard hoof
mm, mm.
impact across arid Australia is detrimental.
Mm.
So it's good that there's a culling program, but how whether it allows for the population to be under some form of control, I'm not sure.
Mm.
I still, can
Gary?
I ask a question? Yeah, I think it was a landline program I saw. Aboriginal people, when they get land rights to areas, they also seem to have some rights to water that's on the land. And I saw one Aboriginal fellow being interviewed, and he was saying that with the spreading of the large number of gold mines, there are some gold mines that require, now I forget the figure because I don't know how water volumes work, but it was either 1 million litres or 1 million megalitres per day that BHP was needing to run one big gold mine.
Mm.
Mm.
Yes.
I found that very disturbing, and there's dozens of these mines.
I think we saw the same article on ABC just a few days ago that highlighted
Yeah,
it. Right? Yeah.
yes,
So it
yes,
is an
yeah.
alarming. Yeah.
So, from a threat point of view, may not be in the Biosphere Reserve, but it's not doing great things to the country, I would suggest.
No, and mining gold usually, somewhere along the line there's arsenic and mercury or something like that.
I remember when I did a diploma of environmental studies at Macquarie Uni, and we had a guy there who was an environmental officer with BHP. And I remember him whispering to me, he said, look, when you get out to these outback areas, he said, you look at the number of shot lines that crisscross the desert, just dozens of them. And then there's explosions all the way along. And the breaking up of the ecosystems through these lines. And I still regret to this day that I didn't leak all that to somebody and get something stirred up on it. But this stuff on loss of water from these mines is very disturbing.
I didn't want to. I'm sorry if I've given the impression that the threats to the natural values in the southwest of Western Australia mean that it's a sorry state of affairs, because it isn't. Yes, there's been a lot of clearing. Yes, there's a lot of mining that is occurring. But if you go to the national parks and some of the large sort of wildlife reserves in the area, the wildflower display is just amazing.
Well,
It takes
we've
your breath
been
away.
we've
Takes your
been
breath
back
away.
3 times just for the wildflowers in Western
Yeah.
Australia.
It's well worth a visit.
Stunning.
E-
Absolutely.
Even
Absolutely.
yeah, even though you can craft a picture, which hopefully I didn't do, that there are ever-present threats which um, are degrading. But I'm hoping I'm giving the impression that the degrading impacts that are there are trying to be managed.
Well, certainly inside the national park, yes, but there is reputedly, many places in Western Australia where just on the road verge is the last example of species X, and they've got such a wonderful diversity there. So outside there, I think, yeah, it is a concern.
Mm.
One thing that Sutherland Shire Environment Centre, one of our campaigns showed the David Attenborough film Oceans this last Sunday, and there was mention of the massive re-emergence of humpback whales, but how the southern right were in low number. Well, they were only like 400 or something, and they haven't really come back to the same extent. It was interesting to see. You had that photo of the southern right whale, and you saw plenty of them, did you, Ross?
Yeah, well, I think that's all we saw, to be honest.
Mm. Oh, good.
Yeah, so there are multiple locations all the way along the Great Australian Bight and into Western Australia along the coastline. There's the whale season is a heavily promoted tourism wise.
Mm.
Um, it's interesting to go to Albany, which is not far away from where this
Mm.
Biosphere Reserve is, and there was a whaling station there
Mm.
that was operational into the 70s. And it's an interesting trip, like a tourism venture to go there and see footage there of how whaling occurred,
Mm.
um, and
Mm.
how it was a photo opportunity in the past. There were pictures
Mm.
showing hundreds of people standing around a whale while it was being dismembered,
Yeah, yeah,
all
yeah.
taking photos. Whereas now you'd think, why
Horror.
why would you do that?
I mean, how was
But
the water temperature at your private beach there? Was it, and did you go much for a swim? I mean, it seemed like unbelievable. You wouldn't want to leave.
yeah, it was cold. It was
Oh, it was
cold.
cold, was it?
Yeah. But there was a marine reserve along the coast there, Gary, which you would.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I was going to ask to what extent was that a sanctuary versus other zonations that are not fully protected?
It was a combination, similar to New South Wales, with a combination of sanctuary and open areas. But it was advertised. There were signs in the national parks and in the council-run reserves near towns, just highlighting where the
No
marine
take.
park was and the different zonations and the
Yep,
different
sure.
uses. Yeah,
Yeah,
so that's heavily promoted.
good.
Mm.
Yeah, well, going forward, I think the move is for 30 by 30 again, but in the marine aspect around the oceans of the world to preserve 30%,
Mm, mm.
which will be good.
I mean, there was a real buzz around
Yeah.
the bit with people that were there. You go to a lookout, of which we went to a lot, and basically what everyone was talking about was whales and where they saw them, and you better hurry up and get out there, for example, because there's a couple motoring past. So it was yeah, it was a common conversation to have with people of all walks of life,
Mm,
all interested in going to lookouts to look at whales. It's just mm,
wonderful.
mm.
Does anyone else like to say something to Ross while we've got him here? And thanks for this wonderful presentation.
When we travelled through that Biosphere Reserve, we knew it was a Biosphere Reserve because there were one or two signs up, but we didn't see much educational signage on it, just explaining, as well as you have, what it was all about. Is the educational side of it sort of picked up a notch or two, would you say, Ross? Was it fairly obvious that they want to educate you about the Biosphere Reserve?
No, no.
No,
I've had
no.
to go and chase the information and
Yeah,
like talk to some people there, and then
yep,
follow up with a bit of research.
sure.
It's not that obvious. Yeah.
No.
Mm.
Mm. All
Yes.
right. Well, Ross, yeah, was very grateful that you did that research because you've provided a whole extra level of knowledge that we wouldn't have normally. I'm sure if we went there individually, we would just be almost like tourists. And you've really, I'm sure, probably piqued the interest of people that haven't been there, or perhaps those that have been there would like to go again with the understanding you've provided. So, thank you very much for that,
Okay.
Ross.
Okay, very good.
With
Yep.
that, I might stop the recording and then we'll finish. So I'll press stop recording.